This, watch.
So she might be, concerned. She might be one of the resistors. She reads that her best friend, who's the head of the garden club, is on this committee, and she thinks, oh, well, hey, Mary Appleton is on that committee. She's heading it up. It must be okay. So
But now I want you to hear what they say about this guy that's in
ultimately become my office. It was funded by the Office of Research in the U.S. Office of Education, because it was funded early on. About 100 major change agents listed from all over the country. Some of them I recognize, some I still don't, but some I do. And so this was a very important project, and it was being carried out I'm sure, all over the country, not just where I was. This was in Searsport, Maine, this lovely little town on the coast of Maine. In the school there, where the guy came in, the facilitator, not Professor Havelock, but a facilitator, to train us. And these were good people that were there. They were some of the teachers from my school, where I was on the local school board, principals, etc. Normal-looking Americans. You really ask yourself, they must themselves have reacted very much the way I did. That's why I've always had a lot of understanding for teachers that have to go through this stuff. I didn't have to continue going through it. They've had to, through the years, constant training, retraining, sensitivity training, break their values.
break their values. Break the values of the teachers. Okay? But now watch this.
No wrong. You've got to have all religions represented, so tolerant of everything, and because that's the New World Order. Disorder, excuse me. Professor Benjamin Bloom is probably...
Now, this guy, Bloom, is somebody that we talk about education all the time. All right? He's big, right? Listen to this. This is heavy. I want you to hear this.
Important behavioral psychologist ever to live. I mean, maybe not quite as much as Pavlov and Skinner, but he really implemented the system in education in the United States. And he was the author of the Taxonomy of Educational Objectives. And I know that doesn't mean much to some. It means a lot to teachers. They know. All teachers have to go through that, Bloom's Taxonomy. And just to give you an idea of how blatant they are, Benjamin Bloom said the purpose of education, and I often say this to parents, really listen to this. You think the purpose of education is reading, writing, and arithmetic? The purpose of education is to change the thoughts, actions, and feelings of students. And then he goes on and he says, he defines good teaching, and this is even worse from the parental standpoint, as challenging the students' fixed beliefs.
Challenging the students' fixed beliefs. So if a child goes in there believing in God, see what I'm saying? Change their fixed beliefs. And watch this. Watch what she says here.
And then, in some of his works that I have, they're in my book, a lot of this stuff is in.
When he says challenge, does he mean challenge or does he mean change? Change the...
Yeah, through challenging. It's through challenging. You go up against them, and you change them. And you asked a good question, because then he goes on in one part of the taxonomy that is in my book.
Talk about Bloom's taxonomy. Have you heard of that before? Okay.
Says that he can take a student from here to there, from a belief in God or his country or whatever, to being an atheist and not believing in his country in 1 hour.
In 1 hour.
Oh yeah, he does it. And I've seen it with students. I've seen it with young people. And they don't even know, and teachers don't even know.
So you think that they're not using these techniques through their television programming?
In 1 hour?
In 1 hour. Now watch what she said, because he asked her, has she seen them do it?
To teachers about it often, they really have an awfully hard time dealing with it. And if you go up to a superintendent, an educational administrative superintendent or whatever, and you ask him or her, have you ever been through sensitivity training? They'll usually crack up because they went through it. They are the worst, those programs. I've been through them. I mean, how can anything be worse than some of the ones that the regular classroom has, but they're the worst. To bring about change. They put them through role-playing, psychodrama, all these psychological techniques.
So there's a lot of experimentation going on in the schools, okay? But now I want you to see this, because this was something that I saw over the weekend. That Earth needs fewer people to beat climate crisis.
We declare with more than 11,000. So
he said over 11,000 scientists are declaring this, that the Earth basically needs less people.
Oh, God.
So it sounds like, just like you.
Soul and green.
Yeah, it sounds like your buddy.
Bill Gates.
Right?
To signatories from around the world, clearly and unequivocally, that our planet Earth is facing a climate emergency. Climate change is more severe than predicted, and it's accelerating faster than scientists were expecting.
We collected 2 sets of data over the last 40 years, things like population growth, fertility rate, meat consumption, and then in parallel we also looked at atmospheric CO2, nitrous oxide, methane, ice melting.
The data is looking much worse than expected. So what we have in this paper is a call to action. Reducing carbon dioxide emissions dramatically, stopping deforestation and planting a lot of trees, reducing meat. And finally, we talk about curbing the population explosion. For example, educating girls and young women about family planning options.
So, the same exact thing Bill Gates said. Okay, I'm telling you, these people have an agenda, and we are not paying attention, and it's going right over our heads, because we're too distracted in terms of seeing what they're doing.
But what's Trump's response to that?
Well, see, Trump doesn't believe the climate thing.
Okay.
They said he started warming up to it a little bit, but at first he didn't believe it. He thought it was a hoax. Just like some other businessmen that's in big business believe it's a hoax. Right? But I want you to see this, because this is one of the ones I wanted you to see before, but yeah, time ran out. But check this one out. This is interesting. Come on, okay. Check this out.
At one of the speeches that Bill Gates gave during the TED conference.
And this is the guy that did the video, Loose Change, the thing about 9/11. All right, the documentary about 9/11.
He's still alive?
An alarming equation up on the board. Essentially, this equation called for massive population control without actually saying it. You see, carbon dioxide was part of the equation, and people were part of the equation.
So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. Now that's back from high school algebra, but let's take a look. First, we've got population. Now the world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
This was a multiplication equation. Now, anybody who's taken first grade math knows that 1 times 0 equals 0. 100 times 0 equals 0. So Bill Gates advocating getting one of these numbers down to 0 essentially calls for our deaths. Well, you can only have 0 carbon emissions if there's no life on the planet. It's an impossibility.
So they're going to all these African countries, United Nations, and they're doing these things with vaccines and all that stuff. Okay? And they already caught them. I think it was in Ghana. They were lacing their vaccines with sterility drugs.
Are cheering.
Yeah. He's talking about the people that were there
essentially calls for our deaths. Well, you can only have 0 carbon emissions if there's no life on the planet. It's an impossibility. Yet the ignorant people in the audience of Gates are cheering, applauding,
See, many of us in here.
Yeah, right.
This guy, no. He's just aware. He's been studying. He did a powerful documentary on 9/11.
It's called Loose Change.
Loose Change. You never seen it?
I've heard of it. I've
Oh,
never
yeah.
seen it.
Yeah,
You have to see it.
it's deep.
Yep.
Is it-
And how many people in here didn't see it?
Is it on YouTube or what?
Okay.
I can-
Yeah, it's on
It
YouTube.
should be. Yeah, that should
It's
be on there.
YouTube. Yep.
Yeah.
So that,
Go, look up Loose Change Second Edition. Second edition.
Did you see the 15,000 that were killed by the so-called botched vaccines? Yes.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, that was late.
Yeah. Well, wait till I show you one on H1N1. All right. H1N1, the flu vaccine.
Was that for swine flu?
Yeah, the swine flu. Right. Now, just keep that in mind. It used to be the swine flu, and then they changed it, the name to H1N1. Why? We'll talk about that. As a matter of fact, I'll bring that next time so you can see it.
and really have no idea what they're taking part in.
Ultimately, what the powers that be are looking for, what the eugenicists are looking for, are 2 separate species, a worker class and a ruling class. The working class gets fed the GMO. The working class breathes the terrible air. They drink the polluted water.
They used to call it the haves and the have-nots. It's going to become where your genes are literally going to tell them who you are and how much you're worth.
Warren Buffett, who has been described by the mainstream media as the most successful investor in history, is yet another one of these eugenicists that attends meetings on population control, portrayed in the media as nothing more than a billionaire, an investor, somebody to be endeared, to look up to, somebody holding an ice cream cone or cavorting with Bill Gates. However, Mr. Buffett is instrumental in many of the things that take place in the United States and around the world. Warren Buffett is invested in both sides of the coin in many of his dealings. Here's just a small example of some of the things that Warren Buffett is actually invested in. From Lowe's to Home Depot to Visa to MasterCard to Comcast and beyond. Warren Buffett was one of the attendees to this meeting on population control that included Michael Bloomberg, David Rockefeller, Bill Gates, and even Oprah Winfrey.
Behind closed doors on this New York campus, a secret gathering of some of the world's most powerful.
Look at the date that was from 2009. Okay. I remember this. I remember seeing this story on television.
Gates, Buffett, Bloomberg, Winfrey. It was like the Super Friends.
In the great hall of the Justice League, there are assembled the world's 4 greatest heroes.
Together with others at the meeting, including George Soros, Ted Turner, David Rockefeller, they're worth more than $125 billion. The new Superman and Wonder Woman, the super rich friends, not fighting bad guys, but fighting for good nonetheless.
The oligarchy is not convinced by findings or statistics or a survey of the world that the world is overpopulated. The oligarchy has to believe that the world is overpopulated simply because they are oligarchs. In other words, it's a structural feature of being an oligarch. In the case of Greek antiquity, we have a very clear example of the connection between oligarchy and genocide based on the notion of overpopulation. We find that the Greek oligarchy, which speaks to some degree to us through Hesiod, was of the opinion that the Greek world and the Mediterranean world was overpopulated in 1000 BC.
Let's check and see what he's saying is true. All right. Trojan War. All right. Plan of Zeus. According to Greek mythology, Zeus had become the king of the gods by overthrowing his father Cronus. Cronus, in turn, had overthrown his father Uranus. Uranus. And Zeus was not faithful to his wife and sister Hera, and had many relationships from which many children were born. Since Zeus believed that there were too many people populating the earth, he envisioned Momus or Themis, who was to use the Trojan War as a means to depopulate the earth, especially of his demigod descendants. This is how old this concept and this perception is. Going back to the mythology of the Trojan War. Okay? So this is not a new game. Shaitan has been whispering this stuff for a long, long time. Right, never
All
stop.
right, so with these groups, is there any particular population that they want to reduce?
Yeah, well, I think we have an idea.
People will go, but the thing is, but poor whites too.
Yeah.
Right.
Think about Margaret Sanger, right? She started what they call the Negro Project. And she talked about, some of her quotes were that blacks were human beings, we were people that should have never even been born. But then she goes on and she talks about whites that have disabilities and stuff like that. You know, getting rid of these type of people. Now the Negro Project turned into Planned Parenthood. And see, the one that was working with her in that was Bill Gates' father. He was also a eugenicist. So Bill Gates is just continuing the work of his father. Okay? So when he talks about the oligarchs, okay, let me see if I can. How many people know what that means? The oligarchs. Let me see. Oops, I didn't mean to do that.
That's like a society where the rich and the powerful control everything?
Exactly. Exactly. All right? But I want you to listen a little more to what this guy has to say. You know, I'm going to find it.
Astounding finding. 3,000 years ago, the oligarchy thought that there were too many people in Greece, too many people in Asia Minor and Anatolia, too many people in the Greek islands, too many people in the Eastern Mediterranean, in Egypt and so forth.
Your confrontation with Ted Turner on the subject of basically eugenics and the fact that he's the head of the United Nations Foundation and has
I'll pause this for a second so we can look at some of these terms. All right? The oligarchy. That's what he kept talking about, the oligarchy. A form of government in which all power is vested in a few persons or in a dominant class or clique. Government by the few. Right? So you're talking about, you know, not even them. There's a power, I believe, that's behind them. Okay? But now, let's look at another term. A cabal. All right? Because we hear that a lot. What do you think cabal is? A cabal.
Well, they always associated with Jewish people.
Okay.
Right.
All right? A cabal. Okay? But let's look at what it means, the English version of it. A small group of secret plotters as against a government or person in authority. Word origin for cabal is Kabbalah.
Now,
Watch
your
this.
girl is in there,
Who was that?
Madonna.
Oh yeah. A lot of them was. Michael Jackson even would wear that little red string around his arm. That was one of the things that show people that practice Kabbalah. All right? But now watch this, because now you got to think about it. The word origin for Kabbalah is Kabbalah. Right? But follow me, because I want to see if you're gonna notice it. All right? So let's go down again. Wait a minute. So it says Kabbalah. Now, an ancient Jewish mystical tradition based on an esoteric interpretation of the Old Testament, any secret or occult doctrine or science, a system of esoteric theosophy and theurgy developed by rabbis reaching its peak about the 12th and 13th centuries and influencing certain medieval Renaissance Christian thinkers. It was based on a mystical method of interpreting scripture by which initiates claim to penetrate sacred mysteries. Among its central doctrine are all creation is an emanation from the deity and the soul exists from eternity. any occult or secret doctrine or science. All right, so Kabbalah, think about it. You heard about it when you read Surah Al-Baqarah, right? Remember you talked about Harut Marut, teaching men magic, right? And so these people, they warned them before, like, if they wanted to learn this magic, they told them that they wouldn't have any place in the hereafter. They wouldn't go to paradise. They would forfeit this if they do this here and now. And a lot of people chose that way. But that's what Kabbalah is. Okay? But now, there was a word that was used, theurgy, right? So let's go. A system of beneficent magic practiced by the Egyptian Platonists and others. The working of a divine or supernatural agency in human affairs. Okay? Necromancy, foreboding, augury, prediction, incantation, divination, astrology, trickery. That one I can't even get. Maturgy, witchcraft, fascination, alchemy, allurement, presage, illusion. All of these things is a part of the occult. Occult. And remember, right, that's numerology, witchcraft, all of that stuff is occult. Now, remember, a cabal, right? Remember we talked about the cabal. Wait a minute, let's go with theosophy. Any various religious or philosophical systems claim to be based on or to express an intuitive insight into the divine nature. The system of beliefs of the Theosophical Society, founded in 1875, claimed to be derived from the sacred writings of Brahmanism and Buddhism, but denying the existence of any personal God. Okay? But now, what is the meaning of Ilah? There's an Arabic term meaning deity or God. Notably, the first statement of the Shahada, the Muslim confession of faith. There is no God but Ilah, except God, Allah, right? Because Allah is this is the God, right? So if La is God, put Kabbalah together with La, Kabbalah, and then think about what it said. What was Kabbalah? A cabal. A small group of secret plotters as against a government or person in authority. A small group of secret plotters as against Allah. Against God.
I just looked up necromancy.
Necromancy.
Yeah,
Right.
I just looked that one up.
That's getting things, trying to contact the dead.
Yeah, I just looked
Right.
it up.
Okay? So, this stuff, once you start breaking things down, you start to see what these things are. Kabbalah is mysticism. Right. It's that those teachings that it describes in Surah Al-Baqarah that Harut and Marut are teaching.
The people who choose to
Okay.
magic over.
Right. These people that are summoning spirits to do their biddings, summoning jinns to do their biddings. Okay? That's why I said this world is so influenced by the occult, but we don't even know it. It's saturated with the occult. And we don't even realize it. Okay? But now, let me see. I did think I was going to get a little bit more of what he said.
How subtle is it?
How subtle?
Yeah.
It's.
You know.
Oh no,
is it to be measured like when it be a vicinity, like back in the day we was taught about subliminal seduction. But that was in the 70s.
Right.
So I'm talking about now, what is the what is it that they are hiding, that's persuading people?
Well, see, they don't even really have to hide it. Because you don't know you don't have the lens to see what they're doing. You don't have the lens to understand the symbols and stuff that they use. There's a language of symbols that you don't even know exists. That's all around us. Okay? That these people do. They have something called sacred geometry that you have no understanding of, because it deals with buildings and the way that they build buildings.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it's deep. This stuff is heavy, but the more and more you study it, the deeper the hole goes. You start to find out more and more things. Okay, but now let's because I wanted you to hear a little bit more of what he was saying, but I'm gonna move a little bit. Okay, because I want to get to let's see. Okay, so we talked about all right. So I'm gonna go back to this. And kind of get back to what we were talking about last time. Alright? So I want you to listen, because I'm going to replay this. Alright? But I want you to listen to what this man said. What the Jews did to the Germans. Alright? Just to refresh your mind.
Since 1850, when the Jews got all the political rights in Germany, in the German Reich, they have done three things which are really dramatic. Number one, they were a small minority of 2% of the population. At the time when Hitler came to power, 500,000 within 60 million German people. 500,000 among 60 million. They were a small minority. This small minority managed to control about 50% of the media, to give about 70% of all judges, to have a tremendous influence in movie and in theater and in literature. They were overrepresented. This is one thing. They were absolutely overrepresented, as today in England, in France, and in the United States. Second, Jews were at the origin of a lot of catastrophic financial bank crashes in Germany between 1870 and 1920. In that time, they made a lot of crashes which have this is all documented. It's not Nazi propaganda or anti-Semitic or Arab propaganda. It's a lot of books have been published, even by Jewish Germans, about this problem. They have millions of German fathers have lost their incomes, their fortune, their savings because of these Jewish gangsters, bank gangsters and speculations people. Then the third point, which was psychologically the most dangerous of all, they have introduced into German art and culture and theater and movie decadence, immorality.
Let's look at decadence. Let's look at decadence. The active process of falling into an inferior condition or state. Deterioration, decay. Some historians hold that the fall of Rome can be attributed to internal decadence. Moral degeneration or decay, turpitude, unrestrained or excessive self-indulgence.
That's what's happening here now.
Right?
Right.
So he's explaining what happened in Germany. And the same thing that's happened in Germany was happening here.
Right.
Okay? But now watch. Because he mentions turpitude. Vile, shameful, or base character. Base character. Animalistic character. Depravity. A vile or depraved act. This is what's going on in this society. Okay? But now, well, that's like shameful. Right. Go, you gonna say something?
No, I was scratching my head. But